have Scott Abbott here on our newest episode of Stood in the Gap. Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Darren, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've known you for about 3 years now, and you are quite an individual, quite accomplished and an incredible speaker and presenter and trainer. And I'm so excited to get to know you a bit more and another side of you, I hope. And then I'm excited for our listeners to know you as well.
Well, thank you. And likewise, appreciate all you're doing, Proact Indy, the organization. Big fan. Keep it going. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Well, we start off every conversation with a quick game or this or that. So it's fun, rapid fire, answer as quick as you can so our listeners can know you a bit better. So are you ready to play this game?
No pressure.
No pressure at all. None.
Right.
Zero.
I'll do my best. We'll see what happens.
All right. Let's go.
Okay.
Locked or unlocked?
Unlocked.
Love or money?
Love.
Money or intelligence?
Intelligence.
Hotel or hostel?
Hotel. Been in both. I prefer hotel.
Carpet or wooden floors?
Wooden floors.
Ice cream or cone in a cup?
Ice cream.
Live in London or English countryside?
Both. I know you probably have to go with one. Having lived in London for 7 years, I'll go countryside.
Tent or camping van?
Camping van.
Silver or gold?
Silver.
B52 or 6'9"?
6'9".
Iced coffee or hot tea?
Iced coffee.
Dancing or singing?
Dancing.
A new phone or a new laptop?
New phone.
And then a play or a musical?
A musical.
So let's transition then our conversation and talk about the story that everyone comes to our show to hear. And that's the story that's behind success, like the story behind the leader. And the story that I'm focused on is the story of someone that stood in the gap for you. The words that were spoken to you that help you see things differently, that help you peek your head up and go, okay, I got this. So what was that story for you? What were those words that were said to you that changed your perspective?
Well, I mean, man, I got dozens. I've been blessed and challenged and had good and not so good. And certainly I'm very fortunate. There's no doubt about it. But it hasn't always been fantastic. One of the big ones for me, piggybacking off of what I said, I've had a great family, very blessed and fortunate in many levels. But we moved a lot as a kid. In fact, we counted in 4 or 5 years, we moved from Chicago to London to Paris to London that's a lot of hotels, a lot of transition, leaving friends. It was just a lot of adjustment going on, right? But I always had my family and we stayed in some pretty crappy places and it wasn't always awesome, but we had the family. And so I think what happened to me when I was in my early 20s, I did something stupid at work. I actually started launching my very first company, a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I've had a few. The owner found out and he fired me. I kind of was like, what the heck do I want to be when I grow up? And I was 23, 24. And I just kind of had this stupid idea that it's time to go on my own. I don't think I was literal about I don't need family. I'd been with them. So it was time for me to go. And so I decided to move out to LA. And I basically packed up all my belongings. And I had a pretty good early career. I made some good money. I got a little caught up in the bling of it all and the materialistic of it all. I had a fancy sports car. I had a cool condo downtown Indy. And I literally stuck everything on a truck and moved out to LA.
So were you running from or running to?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah, I was running from this thought that I was overly dependent on my family and it's time for me to go stand on my own 2 feet kind of a thing. Anyhow, and I was running to what I thought would be a future. And long story short, I get to LA, didn't have a gig. I found one. It sucked. This recession happened and I lost my job. And I couldn't get another one. And here I am. I got this too expensive apartment, a bunch of stuff I didn't know. Well, fast forward a month and I'm going broke. And literally my last 2 months, give or take out there, I'm destitute. I'm selling off CDs. But literally I went out with tens of thousands of dollars of the gear and I pawned it all off to live. At the very end, my last 2 months in the apartment, they turned off the electricity and I was destitute and I was broken. I was broken financially, emotionally. I had some really dark thoughts. I was like, I screwed up. I didn't even know if I wanted to go on. And it sounds, looking back, like, my God, what the heck? And back to the family. My father's my hero. My brothers are great. And so I basically was avoiding them because I was a mess. And so I went a long time without talking to anybody. I just shut down and shut off.
How many brothers you have?
I have 2 brothers and a sister, all older. Then, one day, and literally I was selling stuff to eat, and the notices were on the door, and the landlord kept banging. I was hiding from everybody. And all I had left was really this fancy Mitsubishi 3000 sports car that was probably 3 or 4 or 5 months late in payment. They would have repossessed it back in Indiana. And I finally called home, talked to my family, and my dad and my brothers and everybody basically said, we hear you, we empathize, get home, but get your shit together, get your head around it, snap out of it. It was compassionate. You've heard the expression tough love. It was a shot. I cried, and I can remember it, man. I went 2-3 days just in this funk, and luckily I can still visualize it. I'm not kidding. I was eating $7 at the all-you-can-eat Mexican buffet with other vagabonds and homeless people. I was there, and I said, this is it. And so another good buddy of mine, shout out to Jim Dine, lent me about $250, and I literally moved out with a truckload of stuff. And I took a couple of bags, put it in my car, and I drove back home with this, get your shit together. And I literally made it. I went through the mountains. I said, I'm going to do it. It's going to be scenic. So I went through Colorado and all that shit. And then I got back to Indy. I didn't want to move to back home where our folks were up in Grand Rapids. And a guy who used to be one of my clients when I was with this other tech company hired me. And it was just like out of the movies. I had no money. I rented one of those. You talk about hostel hotel, this is why. I rented one of these 1-month places where the bed folds out of the wall, right? It's that one little unit and the microwave. And I ate chicken noodle soup, and I literally just got by for 3-4 months. I got my act together, and it wasn't one person per se as family, but there's no doubt that without that tough love, get your shit together. I love guys like David Goggins and Willink and a bunch of other people that are out there pushing buttons. I'm kind of into that right now, right? Those guys weren't around back in those days, but that's my stood in the gap moment. I've got a bunch of them, but that one still resonates with me today. And
why does it resonate with you so much? Like, what made you pick up the phone and finally call your family?
As I've grown more into my faith, I think we talked about this on my show. My midlife crisis is I didn't do a bunch of dumb things, but I started getting tattoos, and I started a podcast. So I have a tattoo that represents the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. I'm a Holy Spirit guy. I believe that that's what it was. I believe there was a gentle spiritual tap that literally took me from really dark thoughts, man. Again, whether the Holy Spirit made me make that phone call, my dad and my brothers, my mom, and everybody just say, get your shit together. They did. It was really, that was my dad. That's his style. And he didn't mince words. And, I don't think he's into pop psychology. So the other things that I'm into today, right? I talked about me teaching and facilitating and coaching, right? I'm into that. But his was just shoot me straight. You're really messed up. Get your shit together. And I've used it a few times myself too, by the way. Sometimes you got to be careful. I think the world today, we'd all use a little lesson in being not so fragile. Right. I get vulnerability. I get I get all these things, right? But sometimes it just feels like we got to just realize that it's a moment. We all have seasons, right? And they're words, and it may not be good. It may suck, but we got to step up and get through it. So,
yeah, one of my favorite quotes is that each of us is more than the worst thing that we've ever done. And I think if we don't look at people for what they did, but who they are, then we can get a lot further in life. As far as like addressing issues and overcoming conflict, I think we can be a lot better to be objective and be more neutral.
What you guys do in character building and education, and I believe there are 4 cornerstones to trust and candor: empathy, authenticity, logic, and perseverance. And a lot of times people go, perseverance. Sometimes it's the hard conversations, right? Which hard do you want? And then, the reality is that, yeah, we have opinions like belly buttons. We all got them. But, it's a lot of dynamics in the world today. But I do think there are moments, there are inflection points. I don't think just challenging somebody is always the right answer, because sometimes it can actually do more harm than good. That ability to be mindful of when and where to play that card. You got to be careful. But I'd also say, on the other hand, what I see today because of social media and a lot of things, I think sometimes we're too quick to let something get to us and bother us. And sometimes we just got to hang in there a little longer and realize that failure is not fatal. Success isn't permanent, like those lines.
I'm still learning that balance to be radically candid and more empathetic. Sometimes I'm too blunt or too straightforward.
If you set the ground rules, and we talk about this in our software world about expectations, agreements, and acknowledgments. Expectations are a little bit lazy because you're just setting it. Do as I say. But if you then take it to the next level of agreement, right? And that agreement gets acknowledged, and you do have listening and empathy and candor, it's not easy. There's an art and a science to this stuff. But to your credit, and to your point, I'd rather at least you both lean in and own the fact that it's an and both. Candid, and I'm listening. I have an opinion and you need to hear me, but okay, what do you think? We got to get stuff done.
We have to get stuff done. And so I'm like, we have to get stuff done, but I can't always pause, talk about your feelings.
You can't, right? You can't always hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Sometimes, and it's a big thing we teach, right? Is without tension, without challenge, without frustration, you actually don't get goodness. Think about all the goodness in the world that comes literally from tension. If
we
everything
can't
was just
grow.
A walk in a park at a woo, right? You couldn't be where we're at. Unfortunately, it's just hard sometimes to be in the moment and realize that it's not personal. The ability to try to help people embrace all of the above, right? Authenticity, empathy, facts and figures, execution, the results. Oh, and this thing called culture and feelings and style and the vibe. Yeah. Welcome to leadership. It's messy.
It is, because relationships are messy and leadership is all about relationships. So you alluded to a few of these steps you took after you left LA. But how did you get your shit together? Like, what did you actually do? What steps did you take?
I hit rock bottom. Relatively speaking, and my rock bottom versus others, I wasn't in a foxhole in Afghanistan. I didn't have bombs blowing up. I didn't lose a limb. But it was rock bottom, relatively speaking, being the life that I had known and how I'd lived. I was taken care of. I was privileged, blessed, call what you will. As people know my story, I think if you include my days in college and everything else, I literally have lived. By the time I was 30 years old, I had literally 24 different quote unquote roofs over my head. And this is also, I've been accused of being this thing called an entrepreneur. I've never invented anything, so I don't know if I'm really one. But I think because of all that experience and getting a little toughened up and all the transitions I have, if there's anything about being an entrepreneur that I think I'm okay at is taking something that is and figuring out how to do more with it, right? Sure. Your situation, your time, your season, your head trash, right? And that's what I was like. I think I was 24 when the story I just shared with you happened, maybe 24, 25, right? And, that's 30 years ago. I mean, I got a bunch of stories, though. We all got stories, right? You got a bunch of stories. But that one was pretty defining because I think from there, it set me on a new trajectory, professionally, personally, my temperament. And even, I've had some businesses I've been involved with since then that didn't succeed, that failed. And I always say, what's the worst that's going to happen? But I've seen some pretty crummy shit. A little failure here, a little mistake there, a little bump in the road over there. Oh, somebody's not happy with you or you said something stupid. Yeah, the big scheme of things.
So after you get back to Indianapolis, you come home to your family and they're supporting you as you get back on your feet. Then what'd you do?
I moved into this, they call them utilities or something. I lived there for about 3 months. And if I can give myself some credit, I got a job, paid literally minimum wage. I just made enough. I'm not exaggerating, man. It was rations. It was chicken noodle soup. I knew some people here. They'd take me out for drinks. I stole shit. Literally, I'd take stuff home from a restaurant that was left over. And I did that for about 90 days. And then frankly, I just busted my ass. I worked my tail off. I took this new job that was okay and I made it something that it wasn't. And I literally created some new revenue, some new business. And I made a deal with the guy who owned the company that as much as he didn't pay me next to nothing in salary, I got this thing called commission and I closed some really big deals and I did some really cool stuff because I worked really hard. I said, I'm going to get out of this rut I'm in. And fast forward, within 6 months, I made enough money that I bought my first house in Broad Ripple.
And so you're in tech now. So how in the hell did that happen?
I was a journalism and a communications major and I was finishing off college up at DePaul in Chicago. And a founder of a tech company that became very famous and infamous. They were one of the reasons why the .com crash happened. It's a long story. But he would come to the bar that I was working at while I was finished off school. And I think I spelled technology with a K back then. And I used to also think only weird people went into tech, right? People didn't want to get their hands dirty and didn't really want to work. But it was 88 and he offered me a job. I literally was fortunate, who you know is what you know. And I joined Whitman Hart in 88. And basically I became a telemarketer. No kidding. I made 100 phone calls a day. I had a headset on, microphone, and I get in early and I call out east because it was in Chicago. I stay out late, called out west. And I rocked it. And I did that literally. I was single. I had no family. This was actually before I moved out to LA, by the way. And I rocked it. Then they moved me to Indy. And I was the first, and I rocked it, right? So I rocked it, making a lot of money at my first 2.5 years. That was before I moved out to LA. So I had all that almost like microwave, flash fry success. And I didn't really build character. I didn't have my values. I didn't know what I didn't know. It was about the bling and the wealth and living a good life. And it was. And so then when I got back to Indy, then I went to work for another tech company. And then I started my first tech company back in late 1995. Right after the joke goes, Al Gore invented the internet. This little company by IBM, by the name of IBM, created basically the first use of the internet in business. Right. And that's when I started my first company in Broad Ripple. I help people get on the internet.
And so you're a principal guy now, because you mentioned that you used to not be, like in the early 20s. What are your values?
Make money.
Well, your principles have changed now. They're more outward, right? They're more people focused. So what are your values and how did you get them?
So, not to go all, I've been accused of being a 50-something-year-old millennial. So my social accounts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, it's Scott Abbott, ABC. And the ABC stands for Architect, Builder, Custodian. And a little bit has some spirituality, architect, builder, custodian, carpenter. I think you can connect the dots. And so I've had this for a dozen years. Literally, I'm an architect, builder, custodian of prosperous companies in leadership, and I help people do X, Y, and Z. And so this concept of architect, you should always envision, think of the future, being prepared for where the proverbial puck is going and what's going on, right? Builder, right? I don't just want to tech and think. I want to get my hands dirty, right? I want to put bricks in. I want to put in the flooring, make sure that it's going properly, right? And then custodian, right? A humble heart. And if you are a leader, you should empty the garbage cans. You should wipe down the toilets. You should do the dirty jobs that nobody wants to do. And so my values are based on those three pillars, if you will. Principles, use the word. And then I teach and I coach people to have values in business and in life. But with those three pillars, then I also like to do quarterly themes. And so depending on what's going on in my life, what's working, what's not working, I will then tuck in. I wouldn't call them values. I call them themes. They're just really more about focus. I use a term called concepts, tools, and disciplines. Something's going off track, or I want to start doing something or stop doing something physically, spiritually, diet-wise, or whatever, right? But they're always around and above and beyond, or in addition to this concept of an architect, C, builder, do, custodian, clean, support, hold hands, take care of things.
I love it. So do you feel like you're living in your life's purpose right now?
No. I'm involved with a software company called 90. And one of the many reasons we call it 90 is it's the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. And if you do everything you're supposed to do, if we're being brutally honest, if you hit 80%, that's pretty good, right? And then if you do it even better because you use software and you got the great team, you get up to 90. But you set a life that everything's above 90%, hit 90% of your goals, your to-dos, your OKRs, your KPIs. I mean, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. So I say this all the time. I want to be 90% complete by the time I'm 90 years old. I'm 57, so I think I'm about 62%. So I'm always growing, always evolving. I've got, again, back to architect, builder, custodian. So no, man, I got a lot of improving to do, a lot of learning to do. But I'm at peace. In fact, my theme for this quarter, by the way, is peace. Balance is a big word. This whole work-life balance concept, we can talk about that another time. I just want to live, man. And I think the word harmony is a good word, peace. So that's been kind of my theme. I was probably juggling too many deals, investing and talking and writing. And I got a little out of whack and it bothered my body and my psyche. I'm always struggling with peace and balance, but I can't complain, man. And if I did, I shouldn't.
What do you aspire to do one day? Like what's not happening that you want to happen?
I don't want to run companies anymore. I mean, I've ran big and small and I've been in that seat. I love living vicariously through good people like yourself and being on the sidelines. And occasionally I might put on my visor and get my clipboard and join you, when you're rooting on the team. But, frankly, my brother Mark and I talk about this all the time, that the classic definition of retirement, I don't think is the right. That's not me. I don't know why that's really anybody. This is probably where I hope to be when good Lord says your physical time here is over. I think I'm blessed that I do investments, advisory, I coach, I teach, I write. So I'm in a pretty good place professionally as a career goes, right? But man, I'm all about trying new things when it comes to my head, my heart, my faith. Always on a journey of improvement, but hopefully not in a way that, back to this concept of peace, that it bugs me and I'm not satisfied. That's a never-ending challenge that I have.
Amen to that. Yeah. So who have you been slow to thank that you would like to thank today? That's one of my favorite questions.
I mean, the list is long. I think sometimes we tend to thank when we shouldn't. And I would call that pandering or patronizing, and that happens a little bit. But on a genuine look you in the eye and say, hey, thank you. You want to know something, Darren? And I believe when you're doing shows like this, I think you should always look to your weaknesses, your soft spots where you can improve. I also don't think people should be bashful about what are their superpowers and what they're good at. Back to my story. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of people who don't hear the words thank you from me. I like closing loops when it comes to extending kudos, props, and accolades. There's no doubt that I have individuals that I should thank more. And there's some of the people that probably, whose names I don't remember, but have just been part of the process and the journey. But I'm saying what I'm saying for a reason is because I'm not perfect, God, far from it. Ask around. But I'm pretty almost back to the tattoos that affirm my principles, my commitments. Having a gracious heart and head is one thing, but being literal about it's another. There's a wonderful thought that I've heard a long time ago that I share a lot. And I'll share it with you. If you haven't heard this before, I think it should impact you. But if you think about humans, yourself, and most others on average, we measure ourselves by our intentions, but we measure others by their actions. Perception is reality. You may have great intentions, you may have a good heart, you may have all these good things, but if I don't see it, if it doesn't manifest itself into something tangible, how do I know? And I see this a lot as a coach, and I'm in boardrooms and sessions where people have an intention to speak up. They have an intention to do a host of things, but they don't do it. I don't know. I can see their body language sometimes like, hello, I see it. Come on out. And on the inverse, sometimes people just say things that they shouldn't say, and they should just be quiet about it and keep it to yourself for a little while. You follow me? So what I say to a lot of people, and why I shared my answer with you is, it's powerful when you say thank you, and it's both in gesture and in words, because I see a lot of people who may have meant it, they thought it, they felt it, but they didn't say it. And until you say it, and I also believe that when you put it in back to the Holy Spirit, so one of the things I do in session is when we talk about values, think about 2 or 3 people in your life, personally, professionally, and you're ready. Even in movies, I don't care. And what are their attributes, qualities that you enjoy and appreciate? And when you share those, I actually want you to share the story of your relationship with them. They'll never hear it. They don't know about it, but you put it into the universe, they're going to feel it in a non-literal way. You with me? I think it's just kind of cool. That's the spirit side. But reality is until you tell them that, to your point. And so that's just my one answer. My other answer is I don't call, ironically, my family enough. I'm spending more time intentionally with my folks. Knock on wood, they're healthy in their mid-80s and doing great. But, we're busy. We got a lot going on in our lives, that continuous. And now I would say, frankly, to your question, now you sparked me. I'm driving to Louisville after this. I'm going to think a lot about this, Darren. Yeah. Shame on you, and thank you, by the way, because this is going to be...
You're welcome.
I might be listening to your podcast, and I'm having these thoughts going on. Oh, Darren, damn you. Who do I got to thank? I go to my hotel tonight going, Darren. That's a great provocative question, and I wish I could give you a more little answer, and that's what I'm saying. I do it, but I do like the way you sparked me in that I think, because I'm a big fan of journaling, and I do it in journaling, but again... a journal won't tell the person I'm thanking that I'm thanking them. And I do it good, I think, literally, one of the funnest things, hey gang, you want a really fun idea? Just try this. Do this for about 3 weeks. When you go to Starbucks or you go to the coffee shop or you go to gas station or the store and they got a name tag, you literally look at them and you look right in the eye and they go, hey Darren, how are you? And then when you're done, they check you out. You say, just little things like that to be seen. That's where I'm going. Those little gem moments, man. And you could say, is that thank you? Is that rubbish? Is that put upon? You know what? Even if you feel a little bit like it's fraudulent or I'm faking it, whatever, man. Sometimes it's okay to.
Yeah, I'm with you. So here's your opportunity then to create that gym moment. Your father, your brother.
My mom, my family, wife, kids. Father Kevin, I went through I went kicking and screaming to a program called Christ Renews His Parish. And I was actually hoodwinked, at hindsight, but it was a good hoodwinking. And they didn't tell me that it was a 1-year commitment. I thought I was just going there for a weekend.
That's not like the Great Banquet.
No. So you go for a weekend. And then at the end of the weekend, they go, oh, by the way, now you do to the next group what this group did to you. And that takes a whole year journey. every Sunday night for a year, for 3-4 hours in kind of a group setting. We share, and it was intense, man. It was life-changing, very, very sincerely.
And your family hoodwinked you into that?
No, a neighbor of mine did. But yes, I was told that my wife did know about it and blessed it, if you will, because I would not have done it if I didn't know about it. I thought it was just this 2-day, because I was a hard-charging guy. So Father Kevin has often been on my mind, and I give him a lot of credit. In fact, even when I'm being mischievous or whatever, I'm like, oh God, I got to go see Father Kevin at confession this Saturday. I haven't seen Father Kevin enough. But you put me on the spot, and I'm getting a little older. My brain just doesn't respond as much as possible. But yes, thank you. There's some literal names, and I call this a public display of commitment, a PDC. And you put me on the spot in a good way, and I'm going to hold myself in the spot. And by the end of this week, I'm going to go to my room tonight in Louisville, and I'm going to write down somewhere between 3 and 5. And the reason why I'm saying it this way is because I want to discern. I don't just want to react. Thank somebody just irrespective, but you give them an example, you give them a reason, even more powerful, right? You know what I want to say to all these? What about you, Darren? But I know this is, we don't have as much time here. I am so tempted to go, and you, Darren, and you, Darren, and you, Darren.
Well, I can answer that one question. Who am I slow to think?
Of all the questions you've asked me, which one do you not want to answer? Which one do you want to answer?
The question I want to answer is, who am I slow to think that I probably should? And for me right now in the season of life I'm in, it's my son. My son turned 15 on August 1st. We've been through a lot together. I'm a single dad. And he's made a few attempts on his life in the past 6 months, which has killed my spirit. I mean, I'm really struggling in the personal side. But for him to keep getting up every morning, looking at me and saying, "Good morning, Dad. I love you, Dad." I want to thank him for that, because he has helped me get up. And he's helped me realize that he's here because I am, and I'm not going to give up on him. And he feels that, even though he may not say it all the time. But I want to thank him for that, because I'm very proud of him for how he's showing up and growing into the young man that he is. And I know that he's going to be okay because I'm his dad. And so that's who I want to thank. It's Tyson Armel Slack, my son. So thank you for pushing that back on me.
Happy birthday, Tyson. And keep going, man. Keep going. Thank you for sharing that, Darren.
Yeah, no problem, man. And so my last question for you. So a lot of our listeners are aspiring leaders, and they might need help hearing how they can overcome a challenge. So what's one piece of advice that you can leave with them today that they can take home and internalize and reflect on?
Well, I think it has been somewhat implicit, not explicit in our conversation today. And this is easier said than done. There's no doubt about it, man. But you got to be intentional. And that's a simple word or a big word, depending on your perspective. But let me just unpack that just a little bit, what I mean by intentional.
Please do.
The next version of intentional is you have to be literal. Goes back to the same thing. Intentions is one thing, actions is another, right? You got to be literal. What are my goals? And don't just think about them, literally write it down. And I don't want them written down. I want them written down with specifically objectives and key results. I want numbers. I want data. I want as much quote unquote, although this word kind of got, pejoratized, science over the last few years, right? I use this expression, it's an art and a science, and left brain, right brain, content, and context. But if you're intentional, that means you need to be literal. You talk about values, goals, what you want to do, what you want to stop doing or start doing. James Clear wrote a pretty popular book called Atomic Habits, right? And I call them habitudes. And my point of this is, if you're just about the theory and you're not about the execution, if you're just about the vision and you're not about the traction, right? Vision without traction is hallucination, as the expression goes. But I just see a lot of, again, intentions. I see a lot of aspirations. I see a lot of I want tos and I believe, right? Until you're intentional and you're literal and you write it down, you make it a system. And again, I get it, right? Systems have been bad and they've done wrong things. But ladies and gentlemen, systems in and of themselves are inanimate and they're all flawed. But guess who put the system in is these things called humans. So don't blame a system, blame the humans. and then when you look to the humans, what was their system? Was it good or bad, right? Did they have a process? Did they have protocol? Do they have rules? And a lot of that's getting kind of a bum rap these days, right? Because of, again, bad humans who set up bad systems. But if you look underneath it, what's great about that is typically it's tangible. When something's tangible, it's real. I'm all for faith. Now, it's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
How do I say what I say, what I say?
That's the next episode.
And I'm a flawed Christian. That's a good one, right? But I would say, guys, if you want to get from here to there, read, listen to Darren's show. That system says, this is where I want to be. This is what I need to do. This is how I validate that I get it done. This is how I hold myself accountable. This is how I hold other people accountable, right? And you've got to make it literal. I got to see it. Faith is one thing, but work, life, leadership, management, teamwork, accountability, running companies, you got to be tangible. There's an old question they ask in interviews, the glass half full or half empty. And you guys want to know the true answer and the right answer, the best answer to say for the rest of your life? The answer is both, right? You don't want to be a cynic and say everything sucks. You don't want to be this optimist that says everything's brilliant, right? You want to be what I call positive pragmatist. But I would say leadership, whatever your criteria, your definition is, if you just put it all into a board, you'll find that it's in the lacking, not in the leading. And that's something we need to figure out how to deal with. Another conversation for another day.
Scott, thank you so much for your time, brother.
Darren and listeners, thank you, man. Keep doing the great work at Proact Indy. Speaking of leadership, keep it up. Kudos and wish you all the best.
Now, let me ask you, who stood in the gap for you? What are the words that changed your life? If you can answer that question, then I want you on the show. Send me a message at darren@proactindy.org. That's Darren, DERRIN, @proactindy.org.